Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, my ex-wife and I, college sweethearts, who dreamed of a lifetime together, saw our marriage crumble when she cheated on me. Despite our shared responsibilities and close bond, I discovered she was rekindling an old flame. Heartbroken, I exposed her infidelity on Facebook and left her. Though I've moved on, the betrayal left me wary of trusting women again. Now let's get into the story. I want to share my story here because my ex-wife, who I thought we would spend the rest of our lives together, cheated on me. My wife and I were lovers right from college. We met each other as freshmen in college, and our love story began there. 2 years after graduating from college and getting good-paying jobs, my wife and I officially tied the knot. We always looked forward to getting married, especially her. She looked forward to wearing a wedding band and a pretty gown. So we had a small wedding and started life on a fresh slate. Back in college, we both studied different courses, and as expected, we had different jobs. I worked as an electrician while my wife was in the business sphere. She was a business consultant, and we were both comfortable. We split the bills equally, and we shared responsibilities too. I wasn't the kind of man who would leave all the chores for her, so I ensured I helped whenever I could. I did this because I knew she was always exhausted when she returned from work, so we worked on a plan to make life easier. Since we still lived in the same state where we attended college, what we did was, all of us who were close college buddies would plan a hangout or get together so we could continue with our friendship bond. It wasn't something we did all the time. It was something we planned every 3 to 4 months. Most times, we'd even push it to the end of the year so we could have enough time to prepare well. It was never something big. We were only catching up and trying to support one another however we could. We did this from the next year we left college, and we continued with it even after we married. There were always people who didn't make it to our hangouts, and that's because they were either in another state, always busy with work, or living in a different country. While my wife and I were still in college, there was this particular guy I didn't like. He loved to brag, and he and my wife had a history before I met her. I didn't like him because I always felt like I was competing with him to get my wife's attention whenever he was around. I know it sounds insecure, but I had to ask my wife to pick between him and our relationship, and she picked me. After she picked me, I asked her to stop talking to him and cut all sorts of communication with him, and she did just that. We were married for almost 3 years, and towards our 3rd anniversary, I noticed that my wife started acting differently. She wasn't cold or anything. She just seemed less concerned with what was going on with me. Before I noticed her changes, we used to be very close, and we talked and gossiped about everything, but she just changed, and I couldn't help but notice it. Even when she started acting differently, I never thought she could have been cheating on me. I just thought it was one of her aggressive mood swings and expected she would return to her normal self with time. One day after returning from work and relaxing a bit, I decided to log into my Facebook account on our home computer. I didn't have the Facebook app on my personal phone or computer because I was a social media addict, and the only way I could remain productive was by deleting the apps and downloading them on our home computer, so I could only surf social media in my spare time. In fact, this was a little productivity rule my wife and I followed. So we only used the home computer for social media like Facebook and Instagram. On that fateful day, as I was about to log into my Facebook account on the computer, I realized that my wife's account was still on. Initially, I just wanted to log out on her behalf, but my curiosity had the best of me. She had a lot of unread messages, and I decided to take a quick look at the people she had been talking to and the kind of conversations they had. To my greatest surprise, I discovered that my wife had been talking to the same college friend she had a fling with before we met. I was shocked to read the flirty conversation between my wife and this guy she knew I didn't like. As I went down their chat, I discovered that they had been seeing each other weekly, and she was even talking about going to his place later that week so they could catch up and finish off where they had left the last time. At that moment, everything felt like a joke to me. I was even laughing in disbelief as I read their conversation. I found it very difficult to believe that my wife had been cheating on me for months while I waited for her to return to her old self. After minutes of thinking of all the possible reasons my wife had to cheat on me, I realized there was no good enough reason for her to break my trust like that. I even became so angry, and I took pictures of their conversation with my phone. I wanted to pay her for the pain she caused me, so I changed her Facebook password, and since her email was logged in on the computer, it was easier for me to reset her password. After that, I posted the pictures of their conversation on her Facebook account, made a post as my wife, and announced to the world that I, my wife, was a cheap cheat, and I destroyed my marriage by cheating on my good husband. After that, I logged out of her account and went to her room to pack my property. Later, when she came home that evening, she met me while I was quiet and drinking, and she began to tell me how she received calls from some of our mutual Facebook friends about a post she had made on Facebook. She said someone must have hacked into her account and made that post to ruin her marriage. She even tried to log in, but when she couldn't get the correct password, she concluded that her account had been hacked. I didn't say anything while she talked. I kept drinking, and I watched her as she talked and complained. When I was done drinking to my satisfaction, I told her I knew she was cheating on me with the same guy she had a history with back in college, and she denied it. To show how manipulative she was, she began to cry and said I believed a stranger's post online and not her. I didn't even know when I started laughing, and she was shocked to see me react that way. I couldn't pretend everything was okay, so I told her I was the one who made the post, and I expressed my disappointment in her. After talking, I went into her room, packed my stuff, and left her. After I left, she kept calling. She said she would explain and that I was mixing things up, and I didn't give her the opportunity to explain. Weeks passed, and I didn't take her calls or return them. Aside from being so heartbroken, I started drinking, and it took me a very long time to quit because of her infidelity. I won't lie, my wife's betrayal wrecked my life. I don't know how people get cheated and move on like it's nothing. I tried to do that, but the harder I tried, the more emotionally messed up I was. She even claimed that she still loved me and that I shouldn't let her little mistake ruin our future together. Even though I still loved her, I knew I couldn't be with her. We divorced and I carried on with my life. I still feel fulfilled that she was so embarrassed, and all of her friends saw the kind of person she was, and they even judged her. Whenever I recall how she played me for a fool, I just wish she had the most miserable life out there. I'm so glad my friends were there to support me and talk sense to me. If not, maybe I would have taken her back and not share this story. On the other hand, her AP dumped her because he was more comfortable with their affair when she was still married. I have moved on, but I'm so afraid of women right now. The only women I can keep loving are my mom and sisters. I've learned the hard way that true love and loyalty don't exist, except it's coming from a dog or a cat. Today's second story. In this story, OP recounts his tumultuous marriage, marred by his wife's infidelity and a shocking revelation about his son's paternity. Discovering intimate voicemails between his wife and their pastor neighbor, he orchestrates a public reveal at a party, leading to chaos and the dissolution of both marriages. Despite heartbreak, he advises paternity tests for fathers and resolves to focus on self-improvement and career aspirations. Now let's get into the story. I, 34, recently divorced my ex-wife, 29, female, because she cheated on me and destroyed everything we struggled to build together. I met my wife at a bar for a friend's birthday. It wasn't like we went there to relax. We attended my friend's birthday hangout and she only tagged along with her friend, who knew the celebrant. At the hangout, we got along well and I liked her. After the party, we exchanged contacts and I offered to give her and her friend a ride home. From that night, we became close and chatted occasionally online. During the first few months, I knew her. We didn't see each other because I had a girlfriend then, and my wife and I were only friends. But after my ex-girlfriend broke up with me, my wife and I became close, and in no time, we were inseparable. We ended up dating for 2 years plus, and we married. In the first year of our marriage, everything was beautiful and pleasing. We both worked hard and tried our best to keep everything rolling, but in the second year of our marriage, my wife had to stop working because she became pregnant and her pregnancy had a lot of complications. The complications were so much that I feared the child would not make it, but thankfully she gave birth to a healthy baby. Throughout the time she stayed home to rest, I worked morning and night to ensure I raised enough money to pay the bills and take care of other necessary things, including getting baby stuff. Fast forward to after she gave birth. My wife insisted that she remain home to nurse the baby for 6 months before she resumed work. Even though this meant more responsibility on my shoulder, I agreed to it. I did all of this because I loved my wife and the baby and did not want her to feel uncomfortable. I sacrificed so much, believing that I was making life easier for my wife, but I was only fooling myself and working hard for nothing. Most people say that when their wives cheat, they are always cues, but even as I share my story, I'm still shocked that my wife is still a child. Wife could cheat on me under my nose. I will also say I blame myself because I should have been more vigilant, but I didn't see any signs because I trusted her so much and did not think she would cheat on me. It was even more painful that after 4 years of being married to the woman I thought loved me, I discovered she had been cheating on me from our first year of marriage. The day I found out, I accidentally stumbled upon some intimate voicemails on our home line, and after listening to all of them, I was broken. So broken that I could not stand up from the ground where I sat. At first, when I heard her voice, I thought there were messages she had left her office since they went way back. Aside from recognizing her voice, I also recognized our next-door neighbor's voice, and the shocking part was he was a pastor and was flirting with my wife. He is the kind of religious church pastor who talks to everyone he meets about God and the rest. He even makes you feel like some sinner if you didn't listen to him. This was his personality. If I say hearing the intimate voicemails between him and my wife came as a shock, it's an understatement. Another shocking thing was that they kept mentioning my son's name in their conversations, and this neighbor of mine asked after my son almost every time he sent a voicemail, and I had a stomach-churning feeling that there was something I didn't know about. By this time, my son was almost 3 years old, and all the thoughts of me not being his biological father crossed my mind. So, I secretly conducted a paternity test that same week, and when the results came out, I was shattered. We were not a match. It felt like a bad dream, and I wanted to wake up, but I couldn't because it was reality. Meanwhile, my attitude towards my wife had totally changed. I was literally like a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, and I wanted to confront her and kick her and her baby out of the house, but I came up with a better plan. A plan that would publicly humiliate her and bring her infidelity to the limelight. 4 days after I got the paternity test results, I lied to my wife that I had been promoted at the office, and she was so excited. So, to mark my promotion, I suggested that we throw a small party and invite her close neighbors, her parents and my parents to come and celebrate with me, and she agreed. We made the necessary preparations, and I invited the neighbors myself, including her affair partner. On D-Day, 2 days later, her parents and my parents came as I had invited them, and her affair partner with his wife and daughter came too. To mock him, I asked him to do an opening prayer for our party, and he did that with glee. I had already collected evidence of their affair, including phone records and voicemail transcripts. The party started on a good note, and everyone who came congratulated me for the promotion, lol. While everyone was drinking and gisting, I asked the DJ I hired to change the song to my preferred song, and I paid him extra to keep it playing, no matter how everyone reacted. My preferred song was a compilation of all the voicemails between my wife and my neighbor. When the audio started, nobody understood what was happening until my wife recognized her voice and her AP recognized his voice. Not just that, AP's wife recognized her husband's voice, and all hell broke loose. She created a scene and hit him continuously in the presence of everyone, and he could not even defend himself. On the other hand, my wife's face turned pale as she froze. While the whole drama between AP and his wife was going on, I called everyone's attention and told them my wife had something important to tell me and her family, and she was confused. Her eyes were already filled with tears, and she could not even look her disappointed parents in the eye. When I told her to go ahead and tell everyone who her son's biological father was, her eyes widened, and she started stuttering. At that point, everyone was quiet, and everyone's eyes were on my wife, including AP's wife. At this point, I was so mad and could not contain my anger anymore. I yelled at her, and she hesitated. She mentioned her AP's name, and everyone gasped. AP's wife fell to the ground in disbelief, and people had to rush to her. At the same time, my wife went on her knees and told me she could explain. She said something about her AP coming over to preach to her on a particular day, and it happened. So when she found out she was pregnant for him, the only thing she could do was pin the pregnancy on me as her husband. She didn't tell me because she would hurt my feelings, but as time passed, she and her AP got close and fell in love. On the other hand, her AP wanted to be in his son's life, so she told him she would tell her son who his biological father was when he turned 18. Hearing this even broke me, and people began to yell at her, calling her names for being so cruel. Her parents left shamefully, and I threw her and her son out of the house. It's quite painful that she could actually do that to me after all my years of sacrifices and love. The irony is I have listened to so many stories of mismatched paternity results on this channel, but I believed my wife was faithful and could never do something like that. Lol, so much for trust. Anyways, we divorced. But before we divorced, she got a handful from our neighbors. The couple of times she had come to beg me to give her another opportunity, my female neighbors would quickly rush their children away from her whenever they saw her like she was some closet monster. As for her AP, his wife could not stand the shame, so she divorced. I heard something else happened at his church when members learned about his infidelity and child, but it's not my business. He also moved out of the neighborhood after his marriage because he could not stand the looks of disgust and disappointment from the same neighbors he used to preach to. It's barely a year's worth of time since this happened, and I'm still healing. I advise every father out there or expecting father to conduct a paternity test at birth or before birth if you have doubts. This is the worst kind of heartbreak I have ever experienced, and I hope I heal entirely from it. As for relationships, I doubt I'll be in one anytime soon. I'll rather focus on myself and my career and maybe start a business YouTube channel that I've always wanted to. Today's third story. In this story, OP met his wife in high school and bonded over their love for art, pursued their dreams together, but eventually found happiness in different careers. The husband, who has an identical twin, discovered his wife's affair with his brother during a July 4th gathering. This betrayal led to divorces and fractured family ties, especially between the twins. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I met in high school, and we've been together ever since our junior year. We both met in art class, and we fell in love over our shared interest in painting. It was both of our dreams to go to art school and eventually be able to sell our work for a living. After high school and college, we did our best to follow that dream. However, being a successful painter is a very competitive career, so we weren't able to succeed on that front. We both got other jobs, and we ended up finding happiness in different fields. One thing about me is that I am a twin. I have an identical twin brother, and it's nearly impossible to tell us apart. It's been a funny joke our entire lives, and we have both gotten used to being mistaken by the people around us. There have even been points in our lives where our partners would come up to the wrong person to say something, then we would have to correct them. My wife would always joke about how she almost kissed my brother, or how she was worried she might climb into bed with the wrong twin. Everyone just laughed it off because it was an insane idea. My twin would never let that happen. At least that's what I thought. My brother was my best friend in the world. We were the exact stereotype of twins that you can imagine we were. I was the good twin, and he was the evil twin. He was the one who was always getting into trouble while I was there to cover up for his mistakes. He got married about a year after I did. This is not something that I'm proud of by any means, but because he was my brother and I wanted the best for him, I ended up covering for him after he cheated on his fiancée. It was during his bachelor party. He was completely trashed, and he ended up hooking up with some other random woman in the bathroom at a nightclub. He told me about it after like it was the funniest thing in the world. He didn't even remember it the next morning. I talked to him about it, and he begged me not to tell anyone. I agreed to keep the secret, rationalizing it as just a drunken mistake that didn't need to potentially ruin his marriage. All these years later, I can't help but still think about it. It was very easy for him to slip up at the time, so I can't help but wonder if it was the only time. Ever since my brother and I moved away from each other, we started a tradition of having a 4th of July celebration together. We would always alternate between whose house we would go to, and we would go all out for the holiday weekend. It was always nice for us just to be able to get together and catch up too. Everything seemed normal at the beginning of the weekend. We all caught up, cooked on the grill, and set off a bunch of fireworks. All of the adults had some drinks, and it was a fun time. Toward the end of the night, I saw my wife walking up behind my brother to hug him and kiss him. When I saw them, she had just started kissing the back of his neck. Immediately, I yelled at her and said she had the wrong twin. They pulled away from each other quickly and laughed it off. My sister-in-law and I were also laughing. My wife and brother both said that they thought it was their partner. It was a little uncomfortable, but I believed her. Later that night, after we had all gone to bed, I heard my wife get up and walk out of the room. I assumed she was going to the bathroom or getting some water. It wasn't anything unusual, but she didn't come back for quite some time. After about 10 minutes, I was curious, so I got up to go look for her. I didn't see her anywhere in the house. I went back upstairs to call her, and that's when I noticed her phone was still on the nightstand. While the screen was lit up, I saw that there were a couple of unread messages from my brother. I picked up the phone and looked at them to realize they were sent just moments before she walked out of the room. I unlocked her phone to look through them, and I saw a message that read, "Aren't you serious about what you said earlier? Because I really do think you're very hot." My wife replied saying that she was serious, and he told her to meet her in the garage. My brother had a detached garage in his backyard, which explained why I didn't see her anymore in the house. Their messages were quite alarming. It was only that brief conversation in the messages, but it definitely seemed like they were about to do something in the garage. I went to the garage as quickly as I could to try to catch them in whatever it was they were doing. As I stepped outside, I noticed that the lights inside the garage were on. When I peeked through the windows, I didn't see either of them at first, though I did notice one of the cars rocking back and forth. My gut told me that they were in the car sleeping together. I opened the side door, and I looked inside to see that I was right. I had the foresight to take one picture of them before I opened the door and dragged my brother off of my wife. They were both shocked to see me, but they quickly covered themselves up and tried to apologize. We got into a full-blown screaming match. I was yelling at my brother and threatening to hurt him. My wife was trying to calm me down, but I was yelling at her too. Everyone inside the house heard it, so my sister-in-law pained running out to see what was going on. When I explained everything, she joined in on the argument too. One of the neighbors actually ended up calling the police because we were fighting. Nobody was charged with anything. The officer that came out just did his best to separate us and calm us down. I ended up driving off alone that night to try and cool down without having to be around my wife or brother. When I got back the next day, my brother and wife had been kicked out of the house. I spoke to my sister-in-law, and she told me that she couldn't be around either of them, so she made them leave. I had countless missed calls from my wife, but I ignored all of them. I talked to my sister-in-law before anyone else to see how she was feeling. Apparently, when she asked my wife why she would do that, she told her that it had always been something she wanted to do. Toward the end of our conversation, I told her about what happened at my brother's bachelor party. She was hurt that I didn't mention anything before, but I think that put the nail in the coffin for her. It just didn't make sense to either of us, because my brother and I are identical twins. There was nothing about my brother that I didn't also have appearance with. A few days passed and I was back home and ready to have a conversation with my wife. I planned on telling her that we were going to be getting divorced and she had no say in the matter. When I asked her for clarity, she told me that it had always been something she wanted to do. Because we were twins, she wanted to sleep with both of us. She had been curious about how similar we were in different ways. The more she tried to explain herself, the more irritated I was with her. It really just seemed like she had some kind of fetish about it. I reached out to my sister-in-law and asked her about how things were going with her and my brother, to which she told me that she was divorcing him. Both of us went through with our divorces, leaving my brother and wife kind of screwed in the end. My wife was forced to get a second job to cover some of the bills that she would have to take care of on her own. We were only renting, so we didn't have to go through the ordeal of splitting a lot of our assets. We have joint custody of our children now, and we're working to find some common ground between us to give the kids a semi-normal life. I don't talk to my brother anymore. Honestly, that hurts more than anything in this. Everybody else in my family is kind of frustrated with him for causing such a rift as well.